morning.
Good morning.
Giving honor and praise to God, honor to Pastor Swan of Mount Zion Baptist Church, honor to my pastor, Dr. Elliott Cuff, Senior Pastor of Lincoln Heights Missionary Baptist Church and President of Voices of Tooth Valley, to all pastors and clergy persons assembled, to our Keeper of the Peace, Ms. Sherry Thompson, and all gathered today. Proverbs 15:1 says, "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." I believe that in this case, a gentle answer is like a peaceful protest. Like a gentle answer, if done enough, will receive less and less of a negative response. A harsh word is like violence. It stirs up negative feelings and angers on both sides of things. I was asked to answer the following question. Given the transformation of Nelson Mandela while in prison, to embrace nonviolence and peace as his theme for justice in South Africa, what, if any, influence do you believe the nonviolence and peace theme of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s life and ministry had in this decision? While approaching this question, I had many ideas, but I didn't know how to connect them. And then in the middle of my African American class, it hit me. I had my aha moment. We were discussing the protests done in the South and how they did peaceful protests such as sit-ins, marches, and boycotts. They knew the only way they were going to change anything was to protest peacefully. If they approached the situation with violence, people would not only focus on the violence, but more violence would come from it. Violence only breeds more violence, and absolutely nothing would change. Nobody would pay attention to what they had to say because they were only focusing on the negative. South Africa, along with the South and many other places, had many things to improve on. I feel like a really good way to let people know things need to change is protest. I feel like Nelson Mandela was affected by the peace philosophy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The real power is in numbers. In order to prove a point in the South, they needed to fill the jail cell with people. So when Dr. King asked who would go to jail for the cause, nobody wanted to stand up because they had worked for white people and they could not risk their jobs. What happened next shocked many. One by one, kids started to stand up. At first, Dr. King said no, but the more and more it went on, he began to help lead kids to protest, which helped push President Kennedy to publicly support racial equality. In 1963, hundreds of kids marched to Birmingham, Alabama. This was called the March of the Children. Marching is a good way to solve a problem. It catches people's eyes and attention peacefully, so it was no surprise that the South Africans used this protest as well. In South Africa, the laws were harsher for black South Africans. It's been said if a black African committed a crime, they would get years in prison, but if a white African committed the same crime, they would only just get a fine. So the black Africans knew if they did anything, especially against the government, they'd be incarcerated for sure. But in order to change anything, you need strength in numbers and to protest together. So it was important for them to do so peacefully. One of the biggest problems at the time in South Africa was apartheid. So not only did Dr. King and Mandela fight a similar battle, they used protest to win. Nelson Mandela once said, "For me, nonviolence was not a moral principle, but a strategy. There's no moral goodness in using an ineffective weapon." He's saying that strategy to fight the injustices of nonviolence. But with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he believed that being nonviolent was not just strategy, but a way of life. So if you ask me, I don't believe Dr. King completely influenced Nelson Mandela, but they were brothers in a similar struggle who believed in similar principles. In his speech, Nelson Mandela references Dr. King's phrases, "Both men spoke with different intentions with the same goal. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last." Thank you.